Right, I think we've got everyone. Let's make a start. I should make sure you're all aware that we're live streaming this. So if we could keep the background chatter down to a gentle level, and if it's okay to pass on the news when England score, but if you could do that without screaming, it would be greatly appreciated. How many of you have been to a Stanley Gray lecture before? Okay, so now I know most of the people who've been to more than one sub-race, and some of the people who are members of the Southern Joint Branch, probably. Background on the lecture. Stanley Gray was the chief mechanical engineer of the port of Basra, and he was there in the 1950s and 60s. When he died, he left half of his estate to the Institute, what would then have been the Institute of Marine Engineering, but is now the Institute of Marine Engineering, Science and Technology. And he expressed the wish that the money should be awarded via scholarships, prize, or wherever the Institute saw distinction in marine engineering. And this remit has expanded to cover lectures, continuing professional development events, which this is one of. So tonight, it's always a bit of a challenge when we know that the audience is going to be heavily submarine interested. But given we've got one of our largest branches in the world is based in this region, how do we find something that's going to go across this mix? And we think we've done it. I think we've done it again tonight. So you can all see the title, IMarEST Exploration of the Deep Ocean. But we have Oliver Steeds presenting it. And Oliver is a submarine pilot. He's not a submarine driver, he's a submarine pilot. He's a deep ocean explorer. He works for Nekton Oxford Deep Ocean Research Institute. The last time he presented for us was our annual dinner in March, and we're really looking forward to this. And he's going to send me subtle signals when he sees the score of the football as well, which is great. So I'm going to hand over to Oliver.
Thank you very much. So how many different nationalities have we got here today? How many from England, first of all? A few. Okay. How many actually want to know what the football score is? Anyone? A few. Okay. Good. I've got it on my phone, so I will let you know if we score. If we don't, it's 2 minutes in and we're 0-0. But I'm conscious I'm between you and the second half, so I will keep it. What? England scored. Really? No. We are streaming this, so let's get more excited than that. Come on, England! Right, we will get on with it now. So, congratulations to England. Congratulations to you all for participating in this wonderful event. I am a submarine pilot, not a very good one. I've recently passed my driving test, and we'll come to that in a moment. I'm going to start by telling you a very short story. I was on a small island off Malaysia a few weeks ago, looking out to sea with my 5-year-old daughter called Marina. And she asked me an interesting question, as she's prone to do, that reflects, I think, why we're all here. She said, Daddy, who were the first people who went to sea? And I said, ooh, it's a tough question, my dearest. About 400 million years ago, we all used to be fish. We still have traces of our aquatic origins. Our blood is still salty, like the seawater. And when you were a little embryo in Mummy's tummy, you had gills. She thought for a while, and then she said, Daddy, you didn't answer my question. I'm a journalist, so I've trained her well. But luckily, Google wasn't that far away. And we discovered that archaeologists have found evidence that on the Indonesian island of Flores, that showed that Homo erectus was able to navigate open waters between 800,000 and 900,000 years ago. When it comes to modern humans, archaeologists believe the earliest sea crossings were between 40 to 60,000 years ago in what is now Australia. Now let's fast forward a little bit, otherwise we're not going to get to the second half of the great game. Any news? Okay. So, to the 1870s, the expedition of HMS Challenger, which was the birth of marine science. It's a very young science, the study of the seas, and we've learned a lot about what's happening to our ocean in the last 150 years. I'm going to come back to that. But this is where the journey into the deep ocean, beneath 200 meters, all really began for us. This is the bathysphere. William Beebe and Otis Barton, they are the Yuri Gagarins of the deep ocean. And in the 1930s, in Bermuda, they became the first people ever to descend into the deep, beneath 200 meters. They went down in this bathysphere to nearly 1,000 meters in this machine. Extraordinary pioneers. I don't know, I've seen some of your craft, but how many of you would like to go in that machine? Any takers? Few, nutcases, okay. Seek help. But today the submersible fleets have changed. This is the Chinese sub, the deepest diving sub in the world at the moment, called the Jiaolong. It's 7,000 meters deep, it can operate down to there. The US have obviously got the Alvin down to 6,000. France has got the Nautil. Japan, the Shinkai, and the Russians have got 2 Mirs. So we've only got 6 major submersibles able to explore over 90% of our planet's biosphere. But how much do we actually know? I mean, let's look at the big picture. From space, we're obviously the blue planet. We're blue marble floating in the ether. The ocean covers over 70% of the surface of our planet. The average depth is 4,200 meters. It's this wonderful three-dimensional living space. And the ocean covers over probably around about 95% of our planet's biosphere, where there is life on our planet. So we're not planet Earth, we are clearly planet ocean. The peak of biodiversity in our planet is not on the surface of the ocean. That's where we've got the greatest biomass, but it's actually in the bathyal zone, from 200 down to 3,000 meters down. That is the peak of biodiversity on our planet. So how much of the ocean do we actually know? My chief scientist did some research on it, and these are the numbers. We've explored a fraction of 1% of our ocean. And between 1 million to 10 million species are thought to still be awaiting discovery, the majority of those in that bathyal zone. So what do we know about the current state of our ocean? Here's a short little film which we've made that I just want to show you, which will capture some of the current challenges. Can you hear the audio?
Our economies, our livelihoods, and our food all depend on our oceans.
The Great Barrier Reef is dying.
They are literally destroying the reef wholesale.
Systematically devastated our global fisheries through destructive practices.
Government scientists sounded the alarm about coral, and the oceans are in trouble.
Leading us to unprecedented damage to the oceans and the animals living in them.
NOAA believes 5% of the world's coral could be lost this year.
As much as 8 million tons of plastic waste enters the oceans every year.
Confront an urgent choice.
We are tied to the ocean, and when we go back to the sea, we are going back from which we came.
So let's drill into this a little bit more. Technology is going to work in our favour. Yes. So we've all probably heard about the terrible coral bleaching that's going on, and this is increasingly what our reefs are starting to look like. We've already lost at least 20% of our corals, the rainforests of our ocean, and scientists predict we could lose about 90% by 2050. But let's look at these 4 indicators quickly. 50% of the oxygen is, of course, produced in our ocean, and if you like breathing, as I do, and the England football team do, the ocean is very, very important to us. But the ocean is deoxygenating by 2% in the last 50 years due to climate change. The ocean is literally suffocating. We're seeing the massive growth of what's called oxygen minimum zones, or dead zones, and they've quadrupled in the last 60 years. And when oxygen is low, marine life obviously can't thrive and impacts ocean productivity. nutrient cycling, the global carbon cycle, and even that nitrogen cycle. These low oxygen conditions activate the production of nitrous oxide, which is 310 times more potent a greenhouse gas than CO2. The dead zone in the Bay of Bengal, for example, is expected to reach tipping point in the next few years, and that could change the nitrogen cycle on our planet. To food. 3 billion people depend on the ocean for their primary protein. In 2017, according to the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization, the global fish trade was worth about $150 billion. But they looked at 445 large stocks that they were monitoring, and at least 80% of those global fish stocks are either overfished or declining. This represents a major food security issue for us, particularly for people in low-income nations, where food security issues can quickly become national security issues and international security issues. Just look to Somalia for a case in point. Globally, it's being driven by bad subsidies, poor compliance to globally agreed fishing standards, unregulated and illegal fishing, bycatch and environmental destruction. $2 trillion is the cost of poor fisheries management over the last 30 years. To pollution. The ocean has obviously become a dumping ground. Plastic is on the radar, and at current rates, some scientists are saying that we could have more plastic in our sea than fish by 2050. It's a visible sign of the impact we're having on our ocean. It's becoming the poster child of ocean health. And governments like mine here in the UK are starting to make bold statements, but their plans are totally inadequate to tackle the problem at a deep, urgent or system change level that is required. And plastic is just one part of the problem of ocean pollution. There are many others. There's antifoulants, persistent organic pollutants, heavy metals and other contaminants like flame retardants, and even endocrine disruptors from fragrances, pharmaceuticals, and even your sun cream. If we look at heat as another case, 93% of the anthropogenic heat that we've produced has gone into the oceans. And if you heat water, it obviously expands. And 70% of the sea level rise that we're seeing is caused by that anthropogenic heat that we're putting into the ocean. And when 18 of the largest 25 cities on Earth are by the coast, this represents major risks to lives, to our livelihoods and our infrastructures. So you don't have to be Einstein to realize where all this is heading. We are causing the ocean to suffer its most severe disruption for at least 65 million years. The ocean is acidifying faster than it has for 300 million years. We literally stand at the threshold of catastrophe. We are disrupting the ocean's resilience to support life as we know it on our planet. So we face a profound existential crisis. That is our reality. But look around you here, look around you in other seaside parts of the world, even to our businesses and to our livelihoods. We're not really acting like we are faced with a profound existential crisis. To use a maritime analogy, let's change tack. Let's take a different direction to the wind for a moment. We know the ocean is the majority of our planet, the most important part of our planet, and the beating heart of our planet. But we don't know how healthy the heart of our planet is. We don't really know its true function and what the impact of the changes are going to be. Yes, we stand at the threshold of catastrophe, and to make matters worse, the most important part of our planet is the least known part of our planet. So is there any reason for optimism? What's the score? 1-2. Well, there is, obviously. We're 1-0 up. But there's also some other good reasons why we should be optimistic. Perhaps it's not what we know, but what we don't know that can fuel this optimism. Because throughout human history, exploration has always driven our progress. Leif Erikson's journey to North America in 1000 AD, the discovery of the New World, Magellan's first circumnavigation, Beebe and Barton in the 1930s, and even space exploration from 1957. All of our journeys of exploration have pushed back the frontiers of our knowledge, unlocking immense opportunity and changing our relationship to our planet and to ourselves. Exploration is defined by our relationship to the frontier. Beyond the frontier is the unknown, and we all need the unknown. It gives us a sense of mystery, that gives us imagination, that makes us human. So what would the great explorers of the past be doing today? Columbus, Shackleton, Amundsen, Gagarin, Beebe, Barton perhaps. I believe they would be going beneath the surface, like many of you are doing, breaking what is just a mirror to the sky. They would be exploring the deep ocean, the last great frontier on our planet. And of course, that is where you all come in. You are the pioneers in a new era of exploration, the age of submersibles. You are now our planet's most important explorers. We now have the technology available to discover the deep ocean. That means we can discover more of our planet in the next 10 years than we have in the last 100,000. We are about to take the next giant leap for humanity. And in the last 2 years, we have gathered more data on the oceans than all the previous years combined, from autonomous underwater vehicles, from remotely operated vehicles, from seabed mapping systems, and a proliferation of sensors above, beneath the surface, to the initial DNA sequence library of marine animals. These technological developments are now unlocking extraordinary new research capabilities. The cost of technology is falling. So the volume, diversity, and frequency of ocean data is accelerating our understanding of the sea. And manned submersibles have a critical role to play. ROVs, AUVs, landers, sensor systems for persistent monitoring, they're all different tools, and they all have a very different requirement. They answer very different scientific questions. So this is our mothership, which we used on our first mission to Bermuda. And we used 2 Triton submersibles that you can see, one being launched at the moment. We adapted these subs for scientific research with an array of sensors, sampling equipment. And these submersibles really come into their own when you're undertaking research around complex topography with strong currents, where ROVs, AUVs, and landers just can't operate with the same level of productivity. From a scientific point of view, as you can see with these transparent pressure holes, they're the perfect observation platform for scientists. And observation is the basis of scientific inquiry. And I'll explain a little bit more about how they work in a moment. So this is our subs, and I'm going to give you a sense of the anatomy of how they work. Does anyone know these Triton submersibles? Have you come across them? You have your major pressure hull here. These have a maximum operating depth of 300 meters. You've got your variable ballast tanks on either side. So when you're on the surface, they're full of air, so they give you positive buoyancy. So you have enough clearance to be able to open the hatch and climb out when you're at sea. And behind the pressure hull, you have what's called your another ballast tank, which enables you to create your neutral buoyancy. Under here, you've got your battery pods, and they can both be cut away if you need to create massive positive buoyancy. And it's got a manipulator drum on the front for taking samples. This sub was actually adapted with a lot more scientific equipment, different camera systems, and water chemistry and CTD sampling systems. Once you get inside the submersible, you've got a range of dials, obviously, looking after your oxygen systems, monitoring your carbon dioxide. Everything can be run manually, and also from a computerized station, which is this, which monitors your oxygen levels, your carbon dioxide. You have a carbon dioxide scrubber in your systems. And within the pressure hull, you've got the ability to survive for 96 hours. Should you get stuck down there. So you've got oxygen for that length of time, and you've got the ability to pull out absorbent blankets that you have on the International Space Station and other things to absorb your CO2 if you are down there for extended periods. Of course, the technology that goes into creating this is hugely impressive. And one of the things they've added is to be able to put in your iPod so you can listen to music when you're descending down there. And every submersible pilot seems to have his own playlist. If you're in my sub, it tends to be funk, I'm afraid. So I like to listen to funk when we're descending down into the deep. Others like jazz. One person I met liked One Direction, so we didn't hang around with him for very long. Anyway, moving on. So when you're going down in these submersibles, the first job of the pilot is to brief your passenger before they go down, and to check they're going to be all right when you're going down. And there are 4 key things that you have to share with your passengers before you go down. The first thing is that if the pilot becomes incapacitated for any reason, they need to know how to bring the submersible back up to the surface, and you show them the systems of how to put air into your main ballast tank so you create the positive buoyancy that you need to come up. If you are stuck in an entrapped situation and you need to release some weight, you have the ability to manually cut away your heavy battery pods, so you hope that will generate enough positive buoyancy to get you up to the surface. The second area is if the air supply in your pressure hull becomes contaminated, you need to know how to move on to an independent breathing system, similar to a diver's regulator. The third area is around communications, how you communicate to the surface using an underwater telephone system. And finally, the final thing that you need to alert your passengers to is to ensure that they keep alert. One of the big risks for us underwater is entrapment, so if there are cable systems or falling rocks or whatever it might be when you're down there, you need your passenger to keep alert with you. And you can and you do that briefing before you descend, so you get a sense of if people are going to freak out when you're down there, and if they are going to, then obviously you ask them politely to get out of the sub before they become a risk to themselves and to you. And you advise some of them not to try and open the window when you're down there. You get all sorts of rather strange questions. Some pilots have a pretty dark sense of humour, so if they don't like somebody, what they often do is tell them a story about how the pressure hull at great depth, if there is a problem with it, there will be a catastrophic implosion that will occur. When you're down at sort of 300 metres or so, it's the equivalent of having a jumbo jet resting on your head. So there's an enormous amount of pressure. So the water can come in with a very great force, and at first you might feel a squirt of water, but then you'll be atomised in a nanosecond. So if you don't like someone, a pilot will take down a water pistol and squirt them and scare the living crap out of them. Not something I do, obviously. Anyway, I just want to give you a sense of the experience of what it's like to go down in one of these submersibles. And I'm going to take you on a quick dive on what I thought was one of the most remarkable dives we did on our mission in Bermuda. We descended onto the top of this underwater volcano, this Seabed, and we're down at about 70-80 metres. So no one had ever been down there before. The maps of it were all wrong. And in Bermuda there are 4 major volcanoes. The peaks of one is the landmass of the Bermudan island. But this is another one called Argus. And we descended down and we found this, as you can see, a very strong current blowing across this mesophotic algal forest. And the current was, there were huge numbers of different types of algae down there. We discovered over 40 new species of algae down at those depths. But the current was pushing the algae down the sides, down the flanks of the volcano. So as we descended further down the volcano, down the cliff edge, if you like, down the flanks of this volcano, this is what we started to find. These new coral systems, this is a new coral that we discovered down there that had never been described by scientists before. And there's a whole extraordinary diversity of life down at these depths. And since the mission, we've been working with a whole range of different scientists across 12 different marine institutes. And in total, just on these 65 dives that we did in these submersibles, we were able to discover over 100 new species. From the tiny little fellas, the little cryptofauna, up to those big black twisted wire corals that you saw earlier. They're like the trees of the deep. And this quantity and diversity of species across so many different taxa had never been discovered or described at these depths before. And that has enabled us to be able to confirm the existence of a new zone in the ocean. It's called the Rariphotic Zone, from 130 metres down to 300 metres. And it represents the largest new ecosystem that's been discovered on our planet in decades. And with that data that we found, we've been able to generate actionable information, actionable intelligence to inform policy, to improve ocean governance and help create new and extended areas of a protected area of the ocean, including helping to launch the UNESCO's World Heritage for the High Seas Initiative. I make this point not to trump what we've shout out about what we've achieved, but rather to make the point that there is so little we actually know about the ocean already, that if you undertake a small number of dives into this deep ocean, you can discover a huge amount. We discovered 100 new species and a massive new ecosystem that wasn't previously known. That's how little we know, and we've just scratched the surface. Our journey is really just beginning. But the other thing that we started to do is to tell a new story about the ocean, because our transparent pressure holes in our submersibles enable you to witness people in the deep ocean. And it's that single thing that creates the vital human link that we need to the ocean. And journalists from around the world came to report on our mission, and they went down in the subs. We engaged an audience of over 800 million people who, through those journalists and through the media that we generated. Journalists from the BBC, from PBS, from Forbes, New Scientist, Sky, Guardian, on it went. And we had a huge number of people coming to report. We also did things differently. We helped people laugh about the ocean. And it's one of the things that we wanted to do. I was lucky enough to meet a guy who hosts one of the biggest radio shows in North America, at Sirius XM. And we were chatting, and we were talking about the problems related to the ocean. And he said, look, people just need to lighten up a bit. On one side of the spectrum, there's just this cacophony of nightmare stories about what's happening to the ocean. We need to get people to think differently. So why don't we do a comedy show underwater? And he looked at me and I was like, that's a good idea. And he said, can you do it? I said, sure, I can't see why not. So we took these subs down 1,000 feet onto the edge of the volcano like that, and used our manipulator arms. It was a really steep cliff to latch onto the sides of the volcanoes so we wouldn't slip down any further. And then we had people that dialed in and talked to us. We had comedians from The Daily Show in the United States. We had famous musicians and politicians dial in and talk to us when we were down there. And he was in one sub and I was in the other. And he and his colleagues had some, it's all online. He had some great gags about it, made everyone laugh, played some tunes. And about half an hour into this radio show, we then started to talk about the issues of the ocean. Once people were engaged and inspired by what we were doing, sitting 1,000 feet underwater, talking to the world. So those opportunities and those things have started to communicate differently are so important. And I think storytelling goes to the heart of our challenge, because the exploration of the deep ocean, we know, is the most critical journey of discovery and scientific understanding that we must make and that we can make. But people are still looking to the stars. They're inspired by space exploration. And I think there's very good reason for that, because the story of space is often positive. It's forward-looking, and it's about a brighter future. It starts to trigger the imagination. It builds on those narratives of exceptionalism, of exploration and collective human achievement. And then you look at how we report on the ocean. More often than not, it's media talking about that narrative of nightmares that I spoke about before, how we're killing the oceans. It's mundane. We talk about fish and food security, all important issues. And even when we get to the exploration of the ocean, this is what we're faced by. An inspiring image of a robot in a Tesla, or Jim Cameron in a small little cabin descending to the deepest parts of the world ocean. So what can we learn from space exploration? What can you learn, hopefully, that can help inspire your friends, your families, your colleagues, your sponsors? And I think there's a lot that we can learn from space exploration. The Apollo missions, even polar exploration, Jacques Cousteau's adventures, even perhaps Felix Val Gardner's jump from space. They're all united by some similar storytelling capabilities. Each one is a story, is a gripping story. It's packed with the human drama of what they do. There's an incredible achievement in there. It's the story of overcoming adversity and courage in the face of the unknown. These are positive stories that speak to a brighter future. So what is our inspirational story of human endeavour? Well, I believe it is the story that a lot of you are embarked on. It's the human exploration of the ocean. We just need to tell the story slightly differently. And here's a little film which we knocked together to try and start to play with this idea of what this new narrative could look like. See if I can play it for you. So obviously it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, that film. But there's something to this idea of the Aquanaut program. We haven't quite cracked it yet, but there's something there. It's not quite up to scratch with the astronaut program, but it's starting to think about how we can start to tell our story a little bit differently. And I want to leave you with a challenge, with an opportunity. We each have a simple choice to make in life, I think. We can either choose to live in the nightmare that we currently exist in, and you know where that's heading, or we can choose to change course. Martin Luther King didn't say, "I have a nightmare." He said, "I have a dream." So my challenge to you, your opportunity, I hope, is to try and find your dream, and I hope it's related to submersibles, and try and make the ocean a better place for you, for your families, for your industries, and for your future, and for our planet. I'm going to leave you with my little dream, which is our next mission to the Indian Ocean, which is the least explored ocean on our planet, and one of the least protected, and one of the most at risk. The sustainable development and the sustainable governance of the Indian Ocean holds the greatest potential to transform the livelihoods of 2.5 billion people who live in those surrounding nations, many of them in low-income countries. I shared the dream with a young actor called Brian Cox, who some of you may know is a baddie in quite a lot of films. And we made this little film together. So I'm just going to leave you with this film. Hopefully you can hear it.
We are all explorers. When we see the horizon, we want to go beyond. We want to see what is there, why it is there, what it means to us, how it changes what we know, and how we live with our planet. And when we do, we move forward. It is time we took the next giant leap. The next great journey of human endeavor. It is time we went beneath the waves. The oceans are life, our life, and 95% of them remain unknown. It is time we explored our last great frontier, the heart of our planet, to discover the secrets of the deep before the ocean's demise triggers our own. It is time for Nekton Mission 2.
Oops. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so we've got time for some questions. First one is, what's the score?
1-0.
Still 1-0. So, any questions?
Yep.
Right.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Go on, we've got a WhatsApp question over there.
I was wondering, who else did you take down there next to journalists and comedy radio?
Good question. So the vast majority of our dives were with scientists. We're a scientific-led institute, so the vast majority were our scientific dives to understand how the ocean is changing, looking at a whole range of different parameters, particularly around marine biology. So of the 65 dives we undertook, I think 80-85% were all with scientists. So the submersibles which we were using had a maximum operating depth of 300 meters. The Triton submersibles that you see here with a transparent pressure sphere have been built to 1,000 meters so far, and they've got a new design they've started to build which will be down to over 2,000 meters, but still with that transparent pressure hull.
Okay, Ellen, you go next, and then you can pass on to the next question.
I was wondering, with the new ecosystem, what makes it a new ecosystem? Why should you define it?
Good question. So it becomes, to describe a new zone in the ocean, you have to have a whole range of new endemic species at that layer. So we found a whole layer of endemic species and habitats, both in the water column, but also along the seabed in the benthic biota. So is the combination of that level of endemism which exists just in that layer, which enables us to be able to describe it as a new zone supported by a new ecosystem.
Okay. Paddy, you've got a question?
Thanks so much for a very interesting lecture. I know from the dive that you showed that you had some wire coral you were showing.
Yeah.
They're quite prevalent in much shallower depths, so clearly the question I had is, how do you then determine they're a new species?
Luckily, I'm not a scientist, but I luckily work with some world-leading scientists. And you need to take a physical sample of them and then do taxonomic identification of them and to identify whether they are new or not, as well as with DNA sequencing as well that can help. So it's a process as well as the visual side of it. And we found those particular wire corals to be a new species. I think the most startling discovery was the scale of new algae species that we found, over 40 new species of algae that were beneath the depths of the herbivorous fish in that area. So they were able to grow very abundantly at those deep depths. And we recorded algae down to over 300 meters during the expedition, which I think is one of the deepest ever records of algae.
Next.
Hi, you mentioned that some of the least explored places on Earth are the deepest areas of the ocean. What, in your opinion, is the greatest barrier that prevents us from going there and exploring it?
To explore the deepest parts of the ocean?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the first time we went down to the deepest parts was in the 1960s. So the technology has been around. That was a one-hit wonder with Don Walsh and Jacques Piccard. It was called Project Nekton. That's where we take our name. Don's our kind of spiritual guru. So the technology's been around in many ways. I think it's a lack of investment fundamentally into it. And people, you look at the decadal investments which went into and continue to go into space exploration. If those billions and billions had gone into the ocean, that would be possible. So I think it's part of it's the lack of motivation to invest. And now that's starting to change. We're starting to realize that the most important part of our planet is the least known, and it's destabilizing its ability to support life on our planet. We need to go there. We need to know. But it's still barely on the agenda. That's what's so astonishing. I mean, in the last year, we've seen it rise a little bit. You know, the BBC Blue Planet. You know, people like to talk about the first great ocean conference that was held at the United Nations last year. Brilliant step forward. But there were about 10,000 people there. If you go to a major national cancer conference in the United States, there's going to be 50, 60,000 people there. So we're still miles off the agenda of where we really need to be, considering what the scientists are saying about us sleepwalking into this catastrophe. And it just comes down to funding, ultimately. And part of that funding is, I think, related to creating the public mandate that the politicians need to act. We're starting to see that. We're starting to see sort of the emergence of the ocean as a critical issue. And there's mirrors of what happened with the forest conservation movement, I think, in the late 60s, early 70s, where it started to rise on the agenda and more investment started to come in. But we're still a long way short from the kind of investment that's needed. The technology is there for us to go down. ROVs go down. 3 people have been to the deepest parts of the world's ocean. Jack and Don and then Jim Cameron in 2012. But we've had 24 people on the moon. 12 have walked on the moon. We even played freaking golf on the moon. And we mobilised to do that, and yet we're still so far away from mobilising what we need to do. But it's all part of the story. That's why I come back to what you're all doing. It's part of the story, a part of the passion and the drive will make that breakthrough. It has to. We haven't got an option.
Next.
You touched on the funding there. Who's funding these missions at the moment?
Who's funding our mission?
Is it multinational? Is it government-led?
No, I mean,
business-led? Is it?
so when you come to a lot of deep ocean marine research, it's government funded and government led, and we're not funded that way because we undertake exploratory science. So if you want to go to NERC here in the UK and say, can you give us funding to go and look for something we think might be there, they're going to go, no, piss off. It doesn't work like that in terms of the structure of government funding. So our funding comes from pioneering businesses who want to invest in it. Our founding partner for our first mission, our title mission, was XL Catlin, an insurance company. Not that they wanted the data that we had, rather that they recognise how the ocean changes is going to affect their business and affect the world. And there is a visionary in the company there who understood where the insurance industry really began. And it started off with the Fire of London. And the first thing that they did after the Fire of London was to build a fire brigade. Sensible thing to do. So it's that similar kind of vision and philosophy within that company. We have a few other Kensington Tours, who are a major travel company, the largest travel company in North America, are funding us now. And they realise that that marine tourism and ocean health are intertwined, and they have a deep, passionate feeling of responsibility of what they can contribute to the world. So they're lucky enough to make some profits, and they share some of those profits with us to be able to continue our work. So it's finding those visionaries and philanthropists who can support. But it's so bloody expensive. That's the greatest challenge of my job as the chief executive and the founder is fundraising. It's so difficult, and it's an uphill struggle. Even with the success we're seeing with the Blue Planet and these other things, it still hasn't really started to kick in. And ultimately, the big change needs to happen, not from us, but from massive government-led investments and businesses coming together, and civil society organisations and the media, all finding different ways to affect the level of change that's needed.
Next.
Great lecture, first of all. It's a two-part question. The first off is, what kind of materials are you using for the transparent dome? And the second part is, I know you said a number of the submersibles are going down on the order of 6 to 7.
Whereas the transparent domes, or at least these ones, are going down to 300. Is that difference is it a material problem in terms of getting materials that are strong enough, or is it a design problem in terms of we need better forms of design to get transparent dome submersibles to get deeper?
So we use acrylic in the transparent pressure holes, and they're produced in Germany. And ours, as you noted, 300 meters. The same acrylic has been built to 1,000 meters. They've got designs to be able to take the same acrylic thicker down to 2,000 meters, and that's probably the threshold of it. And then I've seen acrylic under 11,000 meters of pressure, and it becomes fluid, pretty much. It moves around. You really don't want that in your pressure hole. So the deep diving submersibles are made of pressure holes of steel or titanium with smaller windows, conical kind of windows. There have been a few people saying, maybe glass can, using the same structure, that's the sphere being such a powerful structure, whether glass or some sort of reinforced glass might go deeper. There's talk of that, but I wouldn't go in there first. Let someone else do that.
Just on that one, two things. How thick is the dome? the acrylic on it? And also, you talked about budget. What's the workout cost per dive?
Good question. Well, if you get given the subs for free, I mean, so the thickness of I can't remember now. It's about that thick. But what's on our ones a bit thicker when you go deeper. But the refractive quality of the acrylic when you're in the water gives a sense of it disappearing. So you're kind of in an inverse fishbowl, which is great. You don't feel claustrophobic. Cost per dive. Good question. I mean, the actual to buy. I can tell you the cost of buying the subs. So these ones to buy new about $2 million. You can probably pick it up second hand for $1 million. 1,000 meter subs, $1 million US. The deeper diving one, the sort of 1,000 meter sub, is about $3.5 million. They've just brought out a new one which is 500 meters designed by Aston Martin. You might have seen it, called Project Neptune, which is Triton and Aston Martin coming together. And that's sort of specced up with nice leather seats and whatnot. And I think that was like $4 million. But so we don't own the subs. We get them donated, or we charter them at lower rates so we can undertake our missions. If anyone wants to buy me one, I will happily receive it.
Giant.
Thanks for a very exciting talk. About 25 years ago, I was a ship inspector in Cayman Islands, and I was also inspecting the passenger submarines. And at the time, partly answering this gentleman's question, on the deep dive 300 meter, they were almost like big globular, like huge football. They used to go down to 1,000 feet. It's about 300 meters. It used to cost $300 US, and that was 25 years ago, per passenger. They could only take 2 passengers. And of course, passengers used to say, why can't you take 3? So the third one is the dive pilot, the submarine pilot. Unless you want to go yourself. And we also have these 50-seater, 50 passengers. And I tell you, the colors down there, your slides didn't actually do it justice, but when you're actually down in the submarine, it's like another world. Even TV doesn't compare to it. And the colors are fantastic colors. I still can't explain why you have all those fantastic colors in the dark.
Trust me, a lot of these people know it's another world down below. Some of them have explored lots of it around our tank.
It took a while to get through the water here, really. On the largest submarine that went to about 300 feet, they paid $100 per passenger from Nars trip. I don't know what the rates are now, but
if we were charging people on our, because we've got mothership and everything else that's going with it, we'd probably charge people $10,000 a dive, just in case anyone wants to pay for it. But no, if you're doing it on a commercial level, it's obviously a different kind of prospect. If you're with a big support vessel with a whole bunch of science, there's a big cost involved in knocking them down.
Somebody else in here? Yeah.
It strikes me that one of the major differences between space and land exploration and what you do in the deep ocean is vision. But if you're up in space, you can see to the edge of the universe. But when you're down on these submarines, your vision must be a matter of a few meters. So you're just exploring spots in the ocean at a time. Is there any way of sort of expanding the sort of range you can usefully sense in one of these things, so you can cover more area?
I mean, our operating speed is 2-3 knots, so we don't travel particularly fast. There are some scales that you can start to generate using other technology, AUVs and ROVs and things. You can get a far greater scale. But then it depends what scientific question you're asking. If you're asking the question in outer space about the origin of the universe, we might well find it in the ocean. There are a lot of astrobiologists who are working to understand the origins of life, and the most likely place is going to be in the deep ocean. So yeah, you don't have those, and that's part of the challenge of an inspiring narrative for people that we need to overcome. Yep.
With respect to the subjects of the decline of coral and global warming and things, has there been a particular moment in your career which has really brought it home, where you've seen something that's really affected you and go, well, Mike, this is happening, this is real?
Yes, I mean, I was a frontline journalist for 15 years before I started doing this. And I'd just come back from a particularly difficult assignment somewhere, and I was sent up to Scotland, to the island of Arran, to go and report on a marine protected area up there. And I dived down in this one area, which is a protected area, and it was a lush kind of forest, like a rainforest, full of life and that. And then as soon as I crossed over into the area that wasn't protected, it was a desert, it was a complete wasteland. And what happened was that these trawlers had come through, these scallop trawlers had just come through and just devastated it. And it's as if you get a massive bulldozer and you drive it across the countryside, felling all the trees, destroying all the wildlife, taking out all the farms just to catch a couple of cows. That's essentially what they're doing there. And the scale of it is absolutely staggering. I mean, we clear cut about 300 and I think over 300 times the amount of seabed annually than we do clear-cut forests. And often you've got these massive trawlers and these seabed fishing industries who are going off and they're looking to start fishing around seamounts where you've got these great aggregations. And when we've got about 100,000 or so major seamounts around the world's oceans, but only about 50 have been biologically researched properly. So when they go through, they're just taking these things out and they're destroying these undersea Galapagoses. And when I started to realize that, and I saw it visually, I thought, yeah, this is absolutely catastrophic. What else don't I know? So I then turned my head towards using my journalistic skills, trying to learn more about the ocean, started finding out more and more about what was going on. And then it was a point where I came to where I realized that the most important part of our planet is the least known. I remember that moment because I felt physically sick when that realization dawned on me. But you know, it was I just couldn't understand how we could have got to the point where the most important part of our entire planet that makes life possible is also the least known. It's just not sensible, quite frankly. So that's what I changed course and decided to set up Nekton.
You mentioned on your Bermuda expedition that all the maps were wrong. How much time did the scientists with you spend correcting the maps, and what did that involve both technologically and bureaucratically?
So some of the maps which we used at first were from the Challenger expedition in the 1870s, and those soundings, to try and find the top of that seamount, which is only 15 miles off Bermuda, which is pretty well known, should be pretty well mapped. It wasn't mapped at all. They thought, according to this old maps, it was in one spot, and we had some multi-beam sonar system and some other sort of depth finding systems to be able to do some mapping. So we had another a bigger ship which came down from Canada that had the big multi-beam on it, and it's that system which is what gives you the seabed data, your mapping data essentially. And so we were able to use that and fill in the gaps. So when you're deploying the sub, you want to know what's down there. You don't want to, and so you want to know the depths and where you're dropping it. You don't want to sort of drop in the middle and keep going, because you're going to go beyond your operating depth and implode and fade to black. So you don't want to do that. So all the data that we generate, we make open source. It's one of our principles. We just want to get it out there to as many people as quickly as we can.
The mic now. Just we've got some online viewers as well, so questions come in.
Great.
And their question is, would an economic benefit like deep sea geothermal energy or rare earth deposits be a sufficient drive for funding this kind of exploration? So before they go in and harness or mine, is there an opportunity to research and explore?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's the double-edged sword of exploration. If you discover something, people are going to want it. Power for wealth for status always happened throughout exploration. And when it comes to seabed mining and the number of different types of seabed mining, the environmental impact of that is pretty devastating. So, I mean, the immediate challenge that we have is to discover what's there before we destroy it. We are already destroying it. I haven't yet seen a sustainably managed pathway to seabed mining. Could seabed mining generate income that could help to support the conservation of the ocean? Potentially. Happens on land. But we also know what happened on land when it came to mining. How many mining operations actually put their profits back into the major conservation of the areas around them? Not very many. And the sea, particularly the high seas, is the Wild West. And it's out of sight, it's out of mind. So at the moment I haven't seen a solution to that. But there are other things like marine genetic resources, for example, that could start to do that. And from September, these major discussions at the United Nations around biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction into the high seas, who owns that marine genetic resource, and all the different natural products which can potentially come out of that. Again, that's another area where there could be potential funding that could go into conservation. So if you want to protect your biodiversity because it's got value as a marine genetic resource, then that might be a way to do it. You look at some of those natural products and the frontline drugs for cancer, for cystic fibrosis and other things, and HIV/AIDS are coming from marine organisms. So it's a great potential there. If you think about all the millions of species we actually haven't discovered yet, how they could potentially advance clinical virology or biotechnology or other things, that is the opportunity, I think, which comes with exploration. But we've got to be aware of that double-edged sword of exploitation.
You got one at the front there?
Well, you spoke about being a pilot, so how do you choose for a pilot for the submersible?
How do you
choose the pilot for the submersible?
How?
Yeah.
You find somebody who knows what he's doing, who's got some experience, and there aren't very many pilots around. I was lucky enough with our partners, Triton, and they offered to train me. And so there's a period of training the first bit of training is weeks and weeks working with the engineers in the shop, in the shed, in the warehouse, to learn the electronics behind it, learn the systems and everything else before you ever get in it. Then there's some simulation training, and then you have open water training. So it's a whole series. And I've just done a few dives. I've passed my driving test, if you like, but I'm not a Formula 1 driver. So if I was going down, some of the people you saw in some of these images are very, very experienced pilots. And if I was, my wife, for example, I asked her if she would like to go with me. She said, no, I'd like to go with Kelvin, because he's had 5,000 dives. So I appreciate that.
Going back to the deep sea thermal vents, the problem there is huge because the Japanese have done some sort of experimental mining, been very common. Also, off Papua New Guinea, the Australians have granted a license to a outfit called Nautilus Engineering.
Yep.
They're in the process of raising money, but their video on that is awful. It shows you, they say, first of all, they say this is a barren area, and then they show these magic little robots, going around and mining. But, I mean, that's potentially some of the worst mining you could ever do, because those deep sea thermal vents, I think, they're, as well as being, because there's lots of iron and rare metals down there, but the main thing, apparently, these plumes distribute iron around the ocean currents. So once you start mining those things, I think, so it needs to be, something needs to be, has to be an international thing, but if that starts in a big way, there's going to be big trouble, worse than even fishing in schools.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at the moment, the seabed mining is run by the International Seabed Authority. I think IMarEST has a CTEC. If you Google it and look at some of the journalism that's been going on around it, basically you've got 30 people behind closed doors who are carving up the seabed. And it's not just seabed in national waters, but in international waters as well. So when it comes to the rest of the high seas, so beyond our national jurisdiction, you get into the high seas. It makes up about half of the planet. And that's the water column, that's not the seabed. So if you're a shrimp living on the seabed, you're governed and you're looked after by the International Seabed Authority, that 30 people behind closed doors are carving up, giving licenses to people. If the shrimp jumps up into the water column, 6 inches, it's then in the high seas. Under UNCLOS, the UN Law of the Sea, it's the Great Collective Commons, which is the Wild West. There's very few laws to actually govern what's going on there. So they're trying to work this out at the United Nations now, going, this isn't quite right. So that all kicks off in September, those negotiations. So keep an eye on it.
Anyone else?
I saw in some of the videos that there was technical divers supporting the vessels. For the depths you're going, do the technical divers go down to full depth, or do they only go for the shorter dives?
The technical divers worked on our mission were extraordinary. They dived down to 90 metres, sometimes even 100 metres. And then, as most of you know, if you're divers, that's a good 6-7 hour journey back up. So that's the maximum depth they were operating at, and they were extraordinarily productive. So they were undertaking sampling and visual transects with video camera systems at those shallower depth, down to 90 metres, and then we would continue that using the same protocols deeper. But together we were highly effective, and they were just mind-blowing. They would take 7 hours to get back up the surface, and literally they'll be sitting 2 metres from the surface, and have to sit there for an hour. Extraordinary bravery and mental strength to do that.
Okay, so I think we should thank Oliver in the traditional fashion.